Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're actually going to be dismantling an illusion. We're unpacking some truly profound insights from Dr. Rob McLaughlin to explore exactly why the old, tired models of ego-driven, command and control leadership are literally breaking down right in front of us. We're entering some pretty deep psychological territory here, specifically looking at how a leader's internal state doesn't just affect them on a personal level, but actively constructs the shared reality of everyone around them. So let's dive right in by asking a genuinely tough question about the people steering our organizations. Look, modern business culture has totally conditioned us to idolize these intense, uncompromising figures, right? But what if the bold, larger-than-life visionary leader you're following isn't actually steering the ship toward success at all? What if they're quietly, systematically sinking it just to protect their own unacknowledged fears? To wrap our heads around how this happens, Dr. McLaughlin uses this brilliant concept of a center of gravity. Think of a healthy company like a solar system. The shared purpose, the objective truth, the actual work, that sits right in the middle of the table, like the sun. It provides gravity, warmth, light. But a highly toxic center of gravity emerges when that center subtly shifts. Completely unspoken, the leader's unresolved ego and their desperate need for constant validation silently replaces the work. They stop being a sun and instead turn into a black hole, literally consuming all the oxygen in the room.
And when that gravity shifts entirely to the ego, it's wild what happens. Human survival instincts kick in, and it fundamentally rewires how the whole team behaves. The cognitive load of the room completely flips. Suddenly, the big question goes from, hey, what does this project actually require, to what's going to keep the leader stabilized today? Highly intelligent professionals regress. Instead of looking at the data to see if the math actually holds up, they stop reading the environment entirely and start frantically tracking their boss's facial expressions, just trying to figure out how to massage the facts to avoid triggering an emotional meltdown.
This exhausting dynamic leads to what McLaughlin calls personal magnification. This is where the leader's personal image becomes vastly larger and way more important than the actual product the company makes. We've all seen this, right? It's the boss who absolutely needs their name on every single press release, or the manager who sabotages a perfectly working system just so they can swoop in and fix it. The whole organization has to contort itself to protect one person's unresolved self. And the real tragedy here? We often mistake their constant demand for emotional management as just passion for the work.
Which brings us to a quote that perfectly captures the very first casualty in a toxic environment. Proximity to approval becomes significantly safer than the truth. When a system is built entirely on protecting someone's image, reality itself becomes a massive threat. The truth goes from being this shared bedrock we can all rely on to a highly manipulated tool used solely for the leader's self-preservation. Facts that make the leader look like a genius, those are aggressively amplified. Facts that highlight a failure, quickly buried or strategically blamed on someone else.
Let's look at a practical analogy to see how this plays out in real life. Imagine a massive ship heading straight for an iceberg. If you have a healthy crew, one that's been trained in critical discernment, a crew that knows the objective truth is the single most important thing, they'll instantly point out the danger. They'll burst onto the bridge and yell, "Captain, you made a massive miscalculation. Turn the ship immediately." They willingly risk a captain's pride because, well, they know it's the only way to save the actual vessel. But flip that to a toxic system. What happens? A crew conditioned exclusively for blind loyalty is going to react completely differently. They'll stand right there on the deck, look at the impending disaster, look at the captain's confident posture, and just smile. They'll enthusiastically compliment the captain's magnificent choice of an ice sculpture, right as the ship literally sinks beneath their feet. Because in their specific culture, factual disagreements aren't viewed as helpful. They are seen as deeply personal betrayals. So, the absolute crucial point here is how a leader reacts to friction. That's the ultimate diagnostic test for any organization. If a leader only feels supported when everyone is in total, unquestioning agreement, they are effectively forcing the truth to bend around their fragile ego. But healthy leadership bends towards the truth. If a leader genuinely feels relieved when a flaw is exposed, rather than feeling personally attacked, that means they're welcoming discernment. They're fostering a resilient, awake system that can actually survive.
Now, you might be wondering, if ego-driven leaders are so disconnected from reality, how do they stay in power? Well, they substitute actual forward progress with manufactured chaos. McLaughlin calls this the chaotic catalyst. Because their absolute deepest fear is becoming irrelevant, they act like an arsonist firefighter. They actively inject fear, grievance, and sudden erratic shifts into the system. They're secretly setting fires in the building just so they can kick the door down, grab the heavy hose, and play the hero by putting them out, leaving their team completely, perpetually exhausted.
Wait, isn't disruption supposed to be a good thing in business? We hear that all the time, but we often fundamentally confuse necessary business disruption with actual trauma. The real distinction is in the aftermath. Mature disruption clarifies things. It forces the team to step up, grow structurally stronger, and become more capable. Chaotic disruption, which is driven solely by ego, does the exact opposite. It keeps people deeply divided, utterly exhausted, and constantly looking upward for their daily salvation. It's the profound difference between a team that's discerning through growth and a team that's just highly energized by sheer panic. At the end of the day, that old command and control ego is structurally bankrupt. In our incredibly complex modern world, think generative AI, remote workforces, intricate global supply chains, a single ego is a massive, debilitating bottleneck. The old model just cannot process today's complexity. Dr. McLaughlin insists we have to completely abandon that constructed mask we wear to survive and begin exploring the deep psychological territory of what he calls the architecture of becoming. And this brings us right to the absolute core focus of today's explainer, the new models of leadership. The very first evolutionary step is soul-centered leadership. In this framework, the self is genuinely present, but it is not enthroned. What does that actually mean? It means the leader is deeply rooted, authentic, and whole. They're highly powerful and they make the really hard calls. But, and this is vital, they refuse to make their own psychological comfort the thing everyone else has to tiptoe around. Their personal worth is entirely decoupled from the daily operations and fluctuations of the company. Once you master that soul-centered foundation, you can level up to the ultimate goal, which is transpersonal leadership. The prefix trans means beyond, so this goes completely beyond the personal ego. A transpersonal leader is actively serving a master vastly larger than their own specific identity, their power, or their legacy. They are fiercely serving the truth of the work. They shift entirely from consuming the organization's energy for their own validation to actively cultivating reality for the greater good of everyone involved. So, how does this play out in your daily life? Well, the ultimate litmus test is how a leader reacts when things inevitably go wrong, because let's face it, they always go wrong eventually. An ego-driven leader looks at a totally failed project and immediately searches for a scapegoat to protect their pristine image. But a transpersonal leader looks at that exact same failure, totally devoid of panic, and asks, what is the objective truth of this breakdown? What does the work require us to learn from it right now? They demand reality, not a sacrificial lamb to arbitrarily take the blame. Because of that unwavering, intense commitment to the truth, the effect on the organization is nothing short of profound. In the presence of a transpersonal leader, people don't have to nervously shrink themselves to make room for a massive, fragile ego. Instead, the team becomes vastly more awake, infinitely more capable, highly discerning, and remarkably structurally independent. If you want to know if you're practicing transpersonal leadership, just ask yourself, do the people in your orbit feel clear-headed and genuinely capable after interacting with you, or do they constantly walk away exhausted from managing your volatile reactions? Now, let's be super clear about what this model is not. Transpersonal leadership isn't just some softer, weaker, or passive form of management. It absolutely does not ask for false humility. Instead, it demands an intensely demanding internal discipline that places the leader in the right relationship with power. It requires you to be so fundamentally secure and so deeply anchored in your own architecture of becoming that you literally no longer need your hardworking team to serve as a daily validation of your very existence. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a lingering thought that takes all of this way outside the boardroom. We live in an attention economy, right? One that is heavily biased toward outrage and reactive disruption. Consider this terrifying reality for a second. How much of your own architecture of becoming is currently being built by algorithms that explicitly profit from your unresolved ego? Are the digital tools and feeds you interact with every single day quietly training you to demand blind loyalty and weaponize chaos in your own personal life? It's a truly vital question to ask yourself. Because the ultimate goal of true leadership isn't to be the black hole that consumes the room. The goal is to be the kind of sun that allows absolutely everything around you to thrive.